Banana slam jam.
EU's pretty toxic these days. Yeah, this trip EU's been kind of bad, I'll be honest. I was handling it quite poorly at the start. Like, if you were to go back and watch my streams, I handled it very poorly. I've been handling it better the last week or so, which is good. It's a good trial, good test of perseverance and such. I moved to Scotland a year ago. EU Dota's so much better than NA, both skills and tilt. I actually think the Toxicity this time around has been really bad. I think it's mainly skill difference in the supports. I don't think the core players are that much better. I really do believe that the entire meta in NA, I shit you not, like, you can take it for, you can agree with me or not. This is obviously an opinion. I think the entire meta in Dota for North America over the course of the last, like, 5 years has been developed because supports on average are so clueless, other than like the competitive level ones, that cores can't play like an aggressive style of Dota because you can't play aggressive if your supports are just doing nothing. So then cores realized the only way they could win the game was by playing AFK farm, and here we are like 5 years later. I'm pretty sure we're starting to get like some supports, like, you know, Husky I mentioned for 4Zoomers. But, like, other than him, like, in the last, like, 5 years, what support players are there that weren't there before? We've probably lost support players, if anything. Like, PBD doesn't play all that much anymore. We lost Stan King. I just noticed that when I have an actual support player in EU, the game's, like, infinitely different. Like, even just that Clockwork last game, Tanner, like, actual support players. I really do think that's what the difference is in pubs. I think NA pubs are just as good as EU pubs in terms of skill when you get a good support player on your team. They're the exact same. But most lanes I'm in, I have to think, like, how can I not lose this lane so badly? Because my support's so useless. And you may say, like, you know, BSJ always blaming his support or whatever. I'm just being genuine in the fact that, like, it legit feels like my supports never know what I need in lane. In EU, half the time it's, like, more than half the time it's me f***ing up in lane. And because my supports are like playing aggressive and I'm not following them properly. And it's taken time to get used to it. I'm still working on it, but it's getting better for sure. There's just not too much of a way for support players to get better in NA. It's kind of the problem. Like, I don't really know what the solution is. I think it's to develop the tier 2 scene, which they're kind of doing, right? But not really. MSS and SVG? Yeah, I said when you have high tier supports in your games, NA Dota games are really good. And obviously MSS and SVG are very good support players. I said unless they're competitive level supports. And obviously those two would qualify as competitive level supports. It's simply because EU has a lot more players. I also think something about North American mentality. People don't really want to play support. I think that kind of has to do with it as well. Because I don't think a lot more players is a good enough explanation for why one region would have pretty similar level core players and much weaker supports. Like, if it was both, then I think it would make sense. But I don't think that's like a good enough explanation. What are the problems that tier 3, tier 4, and 8 supports need to solve? It's all the stuff that I talk about with cores, man. Like, you need to understand what your core specifically needs in lane and stuff. They don't adjust by game, and they don't play like dual lane matchups and shit. They don't adjust from game to game, and it really is just an overarching knowledge of Dota. There's no like one thing where you can just say teach these guys this and they'll be better. Support requires like in-depth understanding of pretty much every role in the game, and in terms of conceptually, you know, who's doing what your role in the game is, what your team needs for items, and making shit happen on the map, understanding the map. Like, they just don't understand competitive Dota. It shows itself in, like, why Tier 2 Dota and NA, for the most part, is really shit. Like, you have EG, Quincy Crew, and Undying, and then you have everyone else that's, like, a mile and a half below. I hate to, like, even shit on 4Zoomers, but, like, they got literally dumpstered every single game they played against good teams. And I'll just be honest, I do think Crit like SVG, MSS, and Fly are just like on a whole nother level of supporting. I think Dubu is incredibly good as well, and that's why Undying has a chance. Like, I think Husky has come a long way. But like if you compare him to like a seasoned captain, it's just not the same. And I don't really know what you do about it, to be honest. I legit don't know. I think sticking together as a team is the best thing they can do. I think players like Insania, you know, they've come kind of out of nowhere. They did play a lot of Han, though, so it's a bit different, I guess. But, like, if you look at, like, what Liquid was, you know, the team, the roster, like, 2 years ago, pretty unimpressive 2-3 years ago. Nobody really knew these players, other than maybe Koikfa. You also have teams like Team Spirit, even VP, the young VP now. They've kind of come out of nowhere, and it seems like just because the players have played together for a while. I think that's the only solution. So I think teams like Four Zoomers and Undying, if they stick together, would be really good for the NA scene. I think, Moonmeander is pretty solid. I forgot about Moonmeander. He's a 4 position. I think we're just like 2 or 3 years behind the other regions in terms of supports. Like, we just need to develop a scene for the 5th through 16th best teams, and it'll make the support play way better. I think that's really the only way to get better at supporting. You have to like learn lessons in competitive and then practice them in pubs. That's kind of how you practice supporting. You don't really learn supporting by just spamming pubs once you've gotten to that point. Like once you're like trying to be a competitive player, you know, you're 7-8K plus. If you're a support, you do need to play pubs to get better, but it's because you need to practice the things you learn in competitive matches. Otherwise, you're kind of just going to get hard stuck there. You're not going to get any better. Wouldn't you be a decent support? I kind of just don't want to be a support in competitive. There's really not much more to it than that. I know what it takes to be like a captain. I don't necessarily know if I have it or not, but I really have no desire to do it. So it's like, I'm not going to force myself to do something I don't want to do when I don't have to. I think supporting in pubs with good players on my team can help me be a better player. So I think it's fine to play support in pubs sometimes, but captain is not always support. I mean, it's like 90% of captains are support. I think if you're a 5 who doesn't want to captain, you're kind of just like lying to yourself most of the time. Because like even Maposhka, we talked about, or we had an interview with him. He's on Team Spirit. They're undefeated in upper division CIS. He's like, I've been a 5 for, you know, a really long time, and for the longest time I didn't want to be captain, and I told all the teams, you know, I'm not going to be captain. And then I realized one day that if I want to, you know, actually be on a competitive team, I just have to captain. He's like, that's what it takes. You know, it's just kind of how it is. You have like rare exceptions like S4, right? But like, he's also got 8 years of competitive experience. Like, incredibly smart dude, and I'm sure FNG still does a lot for that team, and I don't think FNG, like, didn't want the captain. He just kind of got onto a team that already had one. That's a bit different, obviously. I just know 99% of people are going to be like, but S4 BSJ. Yeah, no, playing core helps you if you're a support player, and playing support helps you if you're a core player. A lot of times carry players don't realize that they're griefing the map the way they're playing. They're like neutering the rest of their team from being able to do anything. And you only really start to realize that when you're playing support and you like look at what your carry's doing and you're like, now what? You know, you don't even know what you're supposed to do. Because the guy's like at the triangle and you want to take top tier 2 and there's nothing else to do. And if your guy's at triangle, you can't take top tier 2. And you're just like holding your dick until he does something. It helps you be a better core player. It helps you both ways. Oh! Dude, that spell usage from Topson, God. Mason griefs his team on the map more than any other streamer I've seen. Mason's like a very hard farmer. Very hard farming carry player. It's fine for NA pubs, but if he were to ever be competitive, he would have to adjust. I don't really see why he'd go competitive, though. He's, you know, making way more on Twitch than most competitive players. I will tell you guys, you know, I've said a decent amount on stream before. If you think you're only toxic in Dota, it's just not the case. Like, you just handle conflict poorly. And do not give yourself that excuse. Like, don't lie to yourself for the sake of, like, feeling better. It's much better to face the truth. It's just how it is. Like, if you are toxic in Dota, you handle conflict poorly, and you are toxic. That's just how it is. I'm not trying to make you feel bad. I'm trying to help you be a better person. That's what I'm trying to do. I don't think that's the case for everyone. Oh, it absolutely is. Dota confrontation is absolutely no different than any other confrontation. Like, in terms of the way you handle it, it is absolutely no different. If you're toxic when it comes to Dota confrontation, it'll be the exact same. The thing about real life is, like, you can avoid confrontation a lot easier than you can in Dota. So, like, for myself, you know, I never thought I was that toxic because I never got really ragey and upset. But what in reality is, if I had something wrong, I just didn't tell people. And that was, like, what I did. Everyone's, like, a bit different in terms of how they execute it, but... At one point, I realized that reflection of how I had behaved in a Dota game and how I handled issues in a Dota game was, like, a reflection of my character. Like, at some point, I realized that. Can't tell you, like, the exact day. I still have days where I'm not the most PMA, and I'm very... I handle conflict quite poorly. And you're gonna have those days. All you can really do is catch yourself, hold yourself accountable, move on. You're always allowed to be upset, guys. It's very different. Like, in real life, I realized that to some degree I am passive-aggressive because, like, that's how I displayed toxicity in Dota, was passive-aggressiveness. And in real life, I didn't say anything. And I always told myself, like, yeah, I'd never, like, say anything to people like I do in Dota. But I don't tell them that I have an issue with them. And then if it's somebody close to me, then eventually I pent up, like, a bunch of frustration towards them and don't tell them and then eventually blow up on them. And it's pretty similar in Dota how I handle it. And I've realized the only way to prevent yourself from blowing up on somebody is to, you know, tell somebody that something's wrong before it's too late, right? So... It's like, you know, I'm just a streamer, you know? I'm no one special. If you think that what I'm saying is a load of bullshit, that's totally fine. I can't convince you. You know, I'm not trying to convince you necessarily. I just hope one day if you think you're toxic in Dota but not the rest of life that you'll learn some similar lessons that I learned, and I'm just trying to help. Damn, seems like I am exactly how you used to be. I wouldn't say I'm, like, past that necessarily. I don't think I'm like that anymore in regards to, like, I'm unaware of it. I still do it. But I'm very aware that I do it, and I catch myself a lot better. But I know I'm less rough around the edges now. Like, I'm not nearly as toxic. It also shows in my relationships and stuff with my family, my girlfriend. It shows. Like, it really does show. It's all about being better than you were yesterday? Oh, absolutely. For sure. All I can tell you is, like, coming to this realization was not pleasant. It's not like some, wow, this is amazing. I realized that I can be better. For me, personally, it feels like dog shit. Because this whole time I thought I was being good, and I wasn't. And that feels like fucking dog shit. It's like, holy shit, everything I thought I was doing was wrong. That feels so bad. But it's worth it. It's worth recognizing it and admitting it and acknowledging it. Sucks, but it's worth it. Do you feel like you play better when you're in a mental state of mind? Oh, absolutely. I mean, mental game for Dota is more than half of it, I would argue. More than half of your effectiveness in a game of Dota. Like, the way I view things, you know, I'll just use examples even if it gets me in trouble with other players. You can't be, like, a shitty-ass person in pubs and get away with it and just continue to be like a successful pro player. Like, it'll never be the same thing. Like, they'll never go hand in hand. You can't be one of those players that, he's just a toxic piece of shit in pubs, but he's not actually, but he's not like that in a team. You're never gonna win a TI. Like, you're never gonna win a fucking TI. Like, there's a reason why, like, certain players make it to where they do. You know, I can't really name, like, a tier 1 Dota player that has placed really high at TI that an asshole in pubs. I think the only exception people use is Seb, and I think, you know, he's come a long way since then. Not gonna name any other names. And it's like, why was I stuck in tier 3 Dota for so long? Like, obvious. I can use myself as an example. For the longest time, I did not have what it took to be a professional Dota player. Do I think I have it now? Eh, I don't know, honestly. I know I have the attitude to be a professional player, but I don't know if I have the rest of it. If you liked this video, please like, comment, subscribe to the YouTube channel, all that shenanigans, because at the end of the day, YouTube does care about that. You may not care about it, I may not care about it, but the YouTube algorithm does. So please do.